inside. I hope you feel it too. Waiting on a line just to be the next to DBQ.
Welcome back, young scholars. Today we're going to be doing some more DBQ. We're going to do the diet edition this time. So the question you should be able to answer after watching the video today is, how do I write an introductory paragraph for my DBQ essay? Just a quick reminder, the DBQ essay is scored on a 7-point rubric. In your introductory paragraph, you're going to need some contextualization and a thesis, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. In your body paragraph, you're going to need some evidence from your documents. Document sourcing, which we will not be doing for this diet edition of DBQ. Evidence beyond the documents is also worth 1 point if you do it successfully one time. Advanced understanding, or the unicorn point, is also worth 1 point, and you will not have to be attempting to try and get the unicorn point for this DBQ. So remember our metaphor of the peanut butter sandwich. We want to be able to incorporate some evidence from the documents and also to be able to successfully source 4 of the documents. But we also need to make sure that we're including outside evidence in the form of good contextualization, some outside evidence in our body paragraph or evidence beyond the document. And then also in a concluding paragraph, we want to build an extension, which is one possible way to get a unicorn point. So you guys need to teach me how to do DBQ. Step 1, when you get a DBQ, what do? You read the prompt. You underline the critical words. And before you get into the documents, if you can, you're going to want to try and make an initial guess. If you want to start building in that outside knowledge into your DBQ, and making an initial guess is one way that can get you thinking along those lines. So here we see our prompt. We talked about the important words in this prompt, in particular that word changes, which might alert you that you are going to be working with the skill of continuities and changes over time, or CCOT. Step 2, after you've read the prompt and underlined the critical words, as you get to the documents, you read and annotate all 7 documents. Step 3, once you've read those documents, you're going to group the documents and start forming claims. So you're going to be placing documents within that share similar characteristics that you can build a claim around into various categories. These are just randomly done, so don't think this is applicable to this DBQ. Then you are going to start building some claims, which will be useful for step 4, which is your thesis writing. Now, before we get to the thesis writing, I want to just remind you, when it comes to claims, there are some tricks, especially if you're doing a DBQ that requires you to work with the skill of CCOT, or continuities and changes over time. Here the word changes should alert you that that's what you should be focusing your essay on. So when you're writing claims that are about changes, right, you want to maybe try and use some change action words. So words like the increase or decrease, depending upon what you're identifying, the increase or decrease in, or the development of, or the growth of, or the spread of. All those are good words to start to work towards building change claims. You can also use some continuity action words. The one that I always teach in class is the persistence of. So if you're talking about something that hasn't changed, in this case, from the beginning of the time period, which is 1550 to 1700, identifying something as a continuity by saying the persistence of is a good way to make clear that you are identifying a continuity. Once you have built those claims, you need to then tie them together in a thesis. This is the bread in our metaphor. So you have your group 1, which ideally is maybe a change. Group 2, and a change type essay is also ideally maybe a change. Group 3, now if you cannot think of a continuity, can you go with another change? Yes. But if you can think of a continuity, that gets you building towards a sort of more complex and nuanced argument, because if you remember the beginning of every DBQ essay, what it asks you to do is to evaluate the extent to which something has, for example, changed. So in this case, you're better off trying to evaluate the extent to which by maybe saying, yes, while there are some changes that have taken place, there also have been some things that have remained continuous. So you're going to write a thesis statement connecting your groups together or your claims together. The thesis, in order to score the point, must consist of one or more sentences located in the introduction or conclusion. I highly recommend you take a strong stab at this in your introduction paragraph. And then if you feel not confident, or maybe if you've changed as a result of writing your body paragraphs, your main ideas, I encourage you to then in your conclusion write "in conclusion" and then rewrite your thesis stronger, more clear, better. You want to try and use connection words or transition words if you can. So words like while, however, although. If it's a comparative essay, maybe words like both or by contrast are good ones to use. I especially love the word however. We'll get to that in a second. So there are templates that you can use for DBQ and LEQ essays that are addressing things like changes. Here's an example that's connected to this particular silver trade essay. So between 1550 and 1700, the time period given by the prompt, the discovery of silver in the Americas led to changes in economic exchange and production, such as the, and then we identify our change A, and then we identify our change B. So go back and make sure those claims that you've developed are clear, and that they do represent changes that have been brought about as a result of the discovery of silver in the Americas. Now we use our transition word here, however, because we want to write a more complex, nuanced essay. A continuity throughout this period was the continuity C. That is a good way to write a thesis. So now it's your turn. I want you to pause the video and open up a Google Doc and begin writing a thesis statement. Remember, you can use your template, so I'll leave that there on the bottom as you pause the video. All right, the step 4 after you've written your thesis, I think, is to logically go back and to write contextualization. So you're going to start your first paragraph, your intro paragraph, with contextualization. It is worth 1 point on the DBQ rubric. I always think logically that it makes more sense to start your essay with thesis, so I would encourage you to maybe, if when you actually are writing this, to skip down maybe to about halfway or 2/3 of the way down your first page and then to write your thesis first. I think logically that makes sense because it's sort of building off the brainstorming that you've just done. But then you need to go back and write some contextualization up here, so I encourage you to indent here your very first line and then write your contextualization up here. Your thesis needs to be in an introductory paragraph, so I encourage you to kind of close that gap up if you do have a gap between your thesis and your contextualization to make it clear to the grader that you're just writing one introductory paragraph. And then I would start my first body paragraph by indenting and skipping a few lines. Now, why is context important? Well, for example, this is a tomato sauce that you can buy at a grocery store. It depicts a young woman who is pretty clearly has some type of emotion on her face or staring intently at something. And so take a second to just think, well, what might she be doing? And if you answered chopping off the head of somebody. This is a painting, Judith beheading Holofernes. This sometimes is the look that Miss Dixon gives me when she gets upset at me. This is sometimes how I feel. So contextualization situates the argument within the broader historical events, developments, or processes of the time period. It helps you understand the sort of bigger picture so that you can better understand the information contained in the essay. It must include specific supporting detail. And in particular, it really should be 3 quality sentences. You can think of the Star Wars trailer, right? Or the example of I'm about to watch Avengers 4 for the first time. I haven't watched any of the previous Avengers, and I need to get up to speed quickly on what are some of the important, most immediate relevant facts, right, that will allow me to understand and enjoy the movie I'm about to watch. Sometimes whenever you're doing contextualization, you may want to go back and just revisit the prompt and make sure that the critical things for contextualization stand out to you. In this case, for me, the critical details that will help derive my contextualization are the date 1550, so the beginning of the period, because it tells me, all right, I need to write about the events immediately preceding 1550. And also in this case, it mentions the discovery of silver. Question, what is the most recent and relevant information in that prior century, in this case 1450 to 1550, the reader needs to know to understand the essay? You don't want to go too far back. You want to try and stick to that period immediately preceding the date that's first referenced in the prompt. Also here, because they give you this event, the discovery of silver, you might want to think about it. What are the most immediate events that lead to the discovery of silver and ultimately the impact that it has worldwide? Yes, you need to talk about the role the Spanish played in the Americas, but maybe bigger picture here. You're also going to be writing an essay about China, potentially. And so I imagine that getting the reader up to speed about what's happening in China in that period from roughly 1450 to 1550 is also important context for them as well. Another trick that I have found sometimes helps students, especially when they're stuck on something like contextualization, is to go back to the inspect themes of the course. So give some thought to maybe what the economic context might be, or the political context, or the social context, or the interaction with the environment, or the technological context, or the cultural context. And just by identifying those themes, it might just get the wheels cranked up and turning a little bit so that ultimately you can generate at least 3 quality sentences describing the context. Now, some of these are obviously more relevant than others in certain essays. So for this one, for example, I definitely think the economic context is probably the most immediately relevant, but certainly other contexts, possibly like the political context or the technological context, I think you can make some argument that each of those possibly could be relevant in building context for this essay. So I hope that can maybe help as a tip to get the wheels turning. Now it's your turn. So what I need you to do is to get your Google Doc back out, and before your thesis, your introductory paragraph, I want you to write at least 3 quality sentences of contextualization. You should pause the video and do that now. At this point, that's all we have, obviously, for the introductory paragraph. Hopefully it should be in good shape for tomorrow. I also, if you have time and you want to try writing some body paragraphs following the DBQ outline and the How to DBQ guide, I encourage you to do that. We will discuss how to do this in more depth tomorrow in class. But as always, you want to use your time wisely. And so in this case, you want to try and get ahead so that you can get this thing cranked out prior to winter break, go into winter break, enjoying your time. I encourage you to do that. So I hope after watching this video, you can answer the question of how to write an introductory paragraph for your DBQ essay. Thanks for watching.